I started the Centurion Leadership Battalion, well, as a group within Food Service Partners first, and then ultimately as a podcast for the fundamental belief that we needed more leadership within Food Service Partners. We've grown as a company, and any company needs leadership in order to grow. I think it's more important than the skill sets that come in. And so when developing leadership, you need to come up with a program. So Centurion Leadership Battalion sort of came our version of leadership based on my own experience and based on the experience of others like me, both in and out of Food Service Partners. And it was basically a system set up to promote leadership because we're not learning it in school anymore. We're not learning it in our business classes. It's just not something that's taught unless you're in sports. And even at that rate, everyone's getting a trophy now. So if everyone gets a trophy, there's no winning, and we're not actually having anyone lead or be a winner. Because in all honesty, a majority of leaders that do it and earn it are winners, and they win, and that's why they're the leaders. They figure out how to win with their people or their teams. So it was a matter of seeing a massive deficit in the population in terms of leadership skills, particularly in the United States, as well as the world as I got in and did my MBA as well. So I saw it both in Food Service Partners as a microcosm, but ultimately the podcast as a whole was to benefit all of those in Food Service Partners, but anyone else out in the world who's interested in leadership or believes that leadership's important for the future. And from there, it's sort of as we got into it, and then as we've really worked on it over the last 4 years, 5 years, I think fundamentally we learned leadership through experience as humans, particularly pre-industrial era. I mean, maybe we learned it a little bit in the industrial era, but I think it came by nature before as a way of survival, whether it was on a farm or whether it was in a family or whatever we were used to as humans. But as we modernized and technology came important, we lost the sight that we weren't getting experience, which led to leadership skills, other than if you go into the army or, play a sport or whatever at an extremely high level, are you gaining the leadership skills anymore? And you can argue politicians and all that, but you're elected to an office, and yes, you were voted for, but did you actually lead? I think that's a lot of things in what are you leading for, and how does it mean to lead someone versus someone to vote for you, for example. So I think ultimately the purpose is there's a deficit in the world in terms of leadership, in terms of moral and ethical leadership, especially. And I think historically, if you look at history, we've seen that in situations like this, when there's extreme lack of positive and growth-oriented leadership, that the world goes into a black phase or a dark age, regardless if it's briefer or not, because we're in a modern age and stuff travels faster. We do so well as society, and pendulum swings the other way. So we've done really well as a society. We didn't really need much leadership, particularly in free world. The economies were booming, people were getting jobs, we're running up deficits, no one's calling the bill, so we did it without real leadership. We sort of just rode the wave, and there's been leaders along the way, don't get me wrong. But I would say holistically, we haven't done it with the same leadership that was intended, in any country, particularly the United States, as our forefathers would have wanted. So it's how do we put that leadership and that desire back into the human. We don't read books anymore like we used to, so it's not that way. Is it audiobooks? Well, we spend most of our time on TV. We don't read like we used to. People back in the day used to travel with the books in their pocket because they didn't have a television or a cell phone to read. So it's how do we take something that's so desperately needed, regardless of where you are in the world or what your job function is or what country you're a part of, and focus on that the world needs leadership, like good, positive, open-minded, democratic, freedom-generating leadership. Because whether we realize it or not, the free market world or democracy or the free leadership of free world leadership, we're far outnumbered by countries that aren't democratic, that don't believe in leadership from a liberty and freedom standpoint. They believe in it from a fear tactic, or you should be scared, or a discriminatory tactic, as we've seen with COVID, like, borderline fear tactics to make people not want to hang out with each other, or fear COVID shot versus not COVID shot. It's not really leading anyone. That type of leadership is leading to more distance between humans, or more uncommonality and more anger towards each other. I mean, we've literally made it so a shot determines whether we're friends or not, right? Or we can lead together. I mean, it's great. I guess we're not worried about whether we're purple, yellow, pink, blue, or brown, or whatever color we're worried about these days. But at the same time, it's like, did we really just replace one social thing with a way worse thing, which is now some ideology over a shot, which is a belief system, which also, if you're truly a leader in a free market world, then you would know that a human is free to make their own choices, just like abortion. We argued abortion for how many years for the human to get to choose to what to do with their own body. Yet we aren't leading in the same way we've been leading. So it's a little bit like we've become hypocrites. We don't actually hold our word. We've led this way. We've held this battle over abortion for how long? I'm not going to argue either way. I believe it's a person's choice, and whatever, and especially the woman's. So why shouldn't it be the shot the same way? Liberal or conservative. It's the leadership is in what's better for the humans, what's better for our economy, what's better for our legacy, beyond what's right in front of us. So I think in terms of developing leadership, how do we do with a generation that isn't driven by leadership? It isn't matter as much because everything's so instant. There isn't the long-term exposure, the long-term experience that actually makes people into leaders. And they're certainly not the mentors anymore that drive leadership into the humans. I can tell you, we have tons of people come into Food Service Partners every day. I have people that can wield a knife that makes your best Japanese steakhouse look like, it's amateur hour at daycare center. But if the person can't lead, I'm dealing with a total imbecile, and that's unfortunate. It's not their fault. Their education system let them down. The school system let them down. Their advisors let them down. Their parents let them down. Everyone in their life let them down. They can't lead because they don't even have a moral, ethical compass to stand on. So how are you going to lead if you don't even know what you believe in, or what you stand for, or take a right of someone? It's impossible to lead unless you're leading in a direction. And it's the reality of, hey, guys, we live in a world where everyone wants to be liked by everyone, and everyone wants to get the most likes by being the most vocal. Well, ultimately, if you want to be remembered in history at any given point, you can do it two ways. You can be a total fucking tyrant and write history yourself, and make your people write history and call you the great, or whatever term you want. Or you can actually lead people and inspire them by letting them lead themselves. And that's like the ultimate thing. I don't need, we've lowered our standard. I can't even imagine in the history of the world if we allowed, the presidential things, or the things that we allow to go on in terms of what we are. I don't care if he wears a tie or a shirt. Obviously, I wear t-shirts every day, so I'm not talking about that professionalism. I'm just talking about we have to face that just because someone was once a politician or a great politician in our minds, that doesn't always happen in the long run. And a fixed mindset or an old dog in a new fight sometimes doesn't win. And so it's the same thing when I'm encouraging leadership. Leadership's got to turn. You've got to have people moving into new leadership positions. You've got to have people growing in leadership so you can grow. Otherwise, our economy doesn't move. No one makes any more money. We don't grow any money. There's no shit. Everyone's like, World War II, and we did so great afterwards. Yes, we controlled economy. Yes, it was great, but we had a generation of leaders that came back from war. So they led our country. And while we may have not done it properly geopolitically, because now we're caught with our pants down again, we still had a generation of leaders that we developed because they had to. Like, they went to war. That's what they did. That's why they were called the greatest generation. But arguably, with what we have at our fingertips, technology, podcasts, book on tape, I don't care, whatever it is. I mean, most podcasts out there, if they're really good ones, you look at the top ones in business and leadership, you're getting all the books in one, because most of the people, if they're anything like me, have read all the books over a lifetime, because that's what we had to do before we had the internet. We couldn't just read a Cliff Notes, and if we did, we had to convince our parents to go buy it for us, which was never going to happen. So Cliff Notes was like trying to like sneak out of the house with $3 and buy them, so now it's on the internet. We read the books, otherwise you failed. And so that's just the way it was. And even if you try to get enough information from your friend, you didn't have Cliff Notes. And I don't know if that's the way it works, but I'm just saying that most of the leaders out there have made anything if they've done a business, if they've been successful, if they're known, they take care of their people, they're actually profiting, and you've seen longevity in their business, not just some internet boom or a person that suddenly made it big off of selling t-shirts for 3 years, but I'm talking about long-term leadership. And so the Centurion Battalion itself, it's not short-term. It would never be. I'm not a short-term person, so ideally it goes on forever after me. It's something takes seriously, and leadership's promoted on a global scale, hopefully, for a long time. I mean, that would be the ultimate vision, because I think it's important in this world to have global leadership, especially if we're going to conquer things like, pollution or fishing or ocean problems or population problems, or trying to get off our planet and go explore other planets, or heaven forbid, even just explore the planet we have by going deeper in the ocean, or exploring nature and how we can fit into it better medically and from a nutrition standpoint for ourselves. So I think that that's all leading, and I think from the standpoint of what we're talking about leadership in this particular point and where I'm coming from, I'm understanding it as a positive thing, as a core values driven based on morals and ethics that inspire people and have long-lasting effects for generations. Because otherwise, I don't see any point in doing anything, and that's just who I am. So if I'm going to do a leadership thing, it's going to be, how do I develop someone to be leaders for future generations so they too can pass it on, so we continue to compound it, one, as the United States, two, as the world, so we all have better economies, we can lead ourselves through, we can talk through issues, we have an understanding that being a leader also means most of the time, I'll be honest, 90% of the time people disagree with you, and you want that. And any leader who puts anyone in place, or people that all agree with them, it's great for moving something forward. Great, you can move stuff forward really quickly, but try to move something forward when 90% of the people disagree with you, and then you've got to construct something that makes sense, maybe not that's true to you, but it's true to all the people that are leaders in your company. Because if they are leaders and you're a leader, you're always constructing something better or trying to improve. It's like being an entrepreneur. If you're not always moving forward, you're not really an entrepreneur. And so it's the same as a leader. It means you're always leading, in any way possible. Even when I'm being led, I'm leading through my actions of showing how I can be led. So I think for the Centurion podcast, the Centurion Leadership Podcast, it's about finding humans who feel the same way that we do, a lot of us, and where's the leadership skills? Where's the leadership skills for my family? Also, we have history of leaders throughout history. We need to identify them. We need to talk about them. What made them great leaders? Hindsight. Because it matters that we look at it that way. Because if leaders and greatness is written afterwards in history, most of the time, then what is it that we need to be doing now to be known for that has an impact like that later? And I'm not saying it's for selfish reasons or whatever, but if you're going to make an impact on the world and you're going to live here, your impact shouldn't be fertilizer in the ground or ashes in the air. So how do we lead where each one of us makes an impact, a big one, and doesn't waste our life or our family's life or whatever? And I get it, you compound families, and that's the point of humans, is ultimately to keep bringing in more humans to the planet. If we're bringing more humans in the world, those humans should be prepared to make the world better than they found it, and be prepared for when it's their turn to lead, that they have the leadership skills in whatever field they want to go into, to lead, to speak up, to talk about the right thing, to put in a perspective or a point of view. That's the whole point of a democratic system or a leadership-based growth system. So the point of the podcast, one, is you're not alone if you're feeling like you need leaders in the world, or you're existing in a company that hasn't trained any leaders, or you're trying to recruit people regardless of age that lack leadership skills. So one, it was for me, but two, I feel like holistically, every person, every company could use more leadership skills for their employees or their team members, or however you want to look at it, all the way up to the top. So if I can give any information from my experience, from my life, or from my different entrepreneurial ventures and the way that I see leadership, I think it's important. I think there's a lot of great ones out there. Jocko, obviously, I love his leadership-based stuff. His is more military-based than mine. I agree with it 100%. I just do it a little differently because I've actually been in business for 23 years in a different way. And my emergencies are less about someone getting shot and more about worried about killing someone with food. So I think every person has to lead in their own way, and I think just like I translated Jocko into my own thing so I could lead, it's no different than this. The point is here. The point of this is to bring something to everyone that they can hear, that they can then translate, come up with their own moral compass and ethical compass in terms of leadership and core values, and then apply it to their life, to their family, to their community, to their work, and it becomes a lifestyle. I'm not talking about a leadership plan or I'm doing this program. I'm talking about a lifestyle that engulfs not only like the way I lead myself, but the way that I eat, the way that I spend time with my family, the way that I go to work, the way that I love my wife or my significant other, whatever, and so, or my children. So, we often think leadership is this thing that it's when we step out of our home, or it's when we go into a public eye, or we turn it on when we go into the office. But it's something that literally should be turned on all the time. And I mean it too. And that doesn't mean, hey, I'm burned out, I need to be led right now. There's another person on my team that I can ask for help. But that's still leading. That's leading yourself to know that I can't possibly win right now on my own or leading. I need someone else to lead and I can follow because I don't have the energy or whatever, but that is still leading. And the other thing I really think that is important in the podcast is I want to get to the fundamental belief, get rid of the fundamental belief system we have as humans, that if we train and lead and grow people, that they're going to take our position. Because exactly. But for me, my most valuable employee is not the guy with the knife cooking. Anyone can hear it in food service partners, whatever. I tell it to them all the time. The most important person in my company is someone who is not only a good leader, but can develop leadership skills in others. Because the skills can be taught to anyone. Every company teaches you, how to use Excel and, how to cut a knife and how to peel an orange. Okay, like I may peel an orange different than the next company, but it's still the same thing. But what I'm talking about, the difference is at Food Service Partners or at any company, if you want to remain competitive and you want to win, you have to develop leaders. There's no other way to do it. Who else is going to lead your teams? Who else is going to win at the end of the day? Who else is going to celebrate? And it's got to be rewarded. So, for all of this, it's got to be, how do we do it all together? How do we lead as a group? How do we encourage leaderships in others? And, there are times at Food Service Partners I purposely am led all the time. Whether it's conference calls and letting other people lead them, even though they're mine, and rotating them, but it's constantly, how do I push them in uncomfortable situations? How do I make it harder for them by pushing them into leadership situations that they normally wouldn't be in a position like this? Okay, you're leading the team today, or you're leading the conversation with this client today. Is it a risk? Sure, but if we treat our client right, and my client knows I throw people in every once in a while as part of the training, and I explain that to him, I've got a happy client. I'm constantly training leaders to better his business as well as mine. So that's the things I'm talking about. Whether you're a school, it's time to take some of the things I'm talking about, or listen to the podcast, write your own podcast about leadership in school systems. I don't know. I do it through work and business. I have my theories. I will tell you guys all day long about children and education systems. But if you're an educator and you want to lead and you want to make a difference beyond what's going on in the education system and want to be a leader, I'm encouraging all that. I'll even help you do the podcast. So that's what it is. It's not about me or Justin Bizzarro and my name's on it, because I'm obviously the one with the experience to ground the podcast, but the experience is about everyone in it, the guests that are in it, the leaders over history we're going to talk about, as well as, what is it that we all need to work on to become better leaders. And so, in the same vein of uncomfortability that we're driving into food service partners and our leaders, the podcast is meant to also start to make the listeners uncomfortable, which is not going to get a lot of listeners, right? I know I'm going to be like, oh, this sucks, Justin, what the hell are you asking me to do? Nope. Going to lose a few. But that's the way it goes, right? If you're not in and you're not constantly growing and you don't know that leadership is an everyday thing that you have to work on for the rest of your life, then it's probably not something for you and you're not going to be a leader. And you're going to wonder why you don't have a lot of money, or you're always struggling, or why you retired with little, or life didn't quite go the way you wanted to, even if you have a lot. It's because you never led, you know? So I think there's a balance, obviously, in life, but that requires leadership of yourself. And we can talk about self-responsibility and discipline, hard work, work ethic, all that, but it first starts with leading yourself. And it first starts with parents instilling those leadership qualities in kids the minute they can, 2, 3, 4 years old. Tasks, whether it's fun or not, get them out there working with you, get them used to doing chores, get them used to it as part of playing, instead of playing with them and then expecting them to lead in the household and do the chores and the dishes. Well, it never was fun. And the modeling you guys do as parents over dishes, no shit, no one ever wants to do dishes. It's the horrifying thing in the household. So it's leading like that. How do you make it fun? How do you teach the kids to make it fun? You know, I honestly, I don't like dishes, but it wasn't until I got married that the first time, or only time right now, that I didn't like dishes, right? I liked them, but something about the way her and I fought about dishes, didn't like them anymore. But before that, my family, we kind of had a balance of the dishes. Everyone took turns. It was kind of a fun thing. We took honor in cooking for each other. Growing up on a farm, time was invaluable, so we take turns cooking, take turns cleaning up, take turns getting the dishes, so everyone had a turn, and it just seemed fair. And everyone had a time to lead for dinner and had a time to do the dishes the way they wanted to, or put the forks up or the forks down in the dishwasher. Who cares? You know, like, really, I see people argue that all the time. It's a ridiculous thing. I know, I mean, in my opinion, it belongs up, just so we're talking about it, but to probably cut that out. But anyway, it's, you know, how do we lead in the household with our families from the minute our children are born? You know, we're trying to prep them for the skills necessary to survive, but I would say our children would put themselves less in bad situations. We would be less compromised. We'd be less worried about strangers doing anything to them if they were more independent and more leading. That doesn't mean I'm going to be stupid. It just means that if I, Justin Bizzarro, had a better education, or someone would have helped me lead early on in my life, maybe something wouldn't have happened to me either. So it's like that, and that's no one's fault or my parents' fault. My parents led me in a different way and gave me a lot of leadership skills. I just didn't know that the opposite, that there was, in teaching leadership, that there's this underbelly side of people that use trust or manipulation to harm people. And that's also what we're talking about here, is how do we lead to stop the people that use leadership or kindness to take advantage of people or abuse them or hurt them across the world. You know, whether it's a government or it's an individual who's hurting children, you know, all the way across the spectrum, it's all wrong. And the only way it gets better is there's voluminous numbers of humans. And if voluminous number of humans are growing and growing their family and doing the right thing and leading and being independent thinkers, which is the whole point of leadership, ironically, even though you need to be led also, but a group of independent thinkers all leading with the same purpose of improving the world, you know, regardless of how they may disagree of how it should be done, somewhere along there, if everyone's willing to listen, a great idea is going to come out of there. And it's probably going to be pretty simple because you had a lot of complex people doing a lot of complex thought with a lot of complex opinions. And so the leadership is, how do we simplify things so we can make improvements? How do we set standards in leadership or in our country or in our food chain or in our businesses and lead by them so there's proper boundaries and structures for people to succeed and lead within? The Centurion Battalion is about growing the human from a leadership standpoint, so that human or the humans that listen to it, and it doesn't have to be in my way. I want everyone to own their way of doing it. They should own their own leadership, and they should own the leadership of themselves. But it's to get each person that listens to grow as a human so they can grow other humans ultimately, so they can protect the innocent and the needy, so they can too one day lead other people to see that they can get out of bad situations, because there's no more better leadership than someone who's got out of something hard to inspire other people to get out of a similar hard situation. So that's what it's about, and you're not alone. And while there's different hardships for people, it doesn't mean that hardship isn't a necessity to leadership. It's actually a requirement. So everyone's been through a hardship, passing of a parent, getting arrested, but it's part of what's happening. We can still lead through it and make a difference. So that's part of the podcast, is how do we lead ourselves through this? How do we lead the next generation so they are better than we were at leadership? And ultimately, how do we improve the planet, the animals on it, and protect our food chain and our water supply while doing it? Because that's ultimately the leadership. Because our purpose as humans is, we really were put here to breed and breed other humans just like other animals, so the human race continues on. That's nature. But if the human race is going to continue on and excel, it has to always be better than the next generation. That's our responsibility. That's what it means to be the highest thinking being on this planet. We're ultimately stewards of this whole planet. So whether it's taking care of our animals, or eating properly, or eating more humanely raised and sustainable products or renewable products, we have to have leadership, and each of us has to lead in the way that we know, with our skill set and our knowledge base, in order to do it for a better world. So I encourage everyone to listen to the podcast, even if you only get a few things out of it. Share it, subscribe to it, tell people about it, and ultimately I hope that you improve your leadership skills and you improve your life, and especially improve your family's life and those around you, and better your communities. So that's the goal. Thank you.